Okay, I think we can get started now. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today for FEOC and OBBA ensuring bankable compliant BESS projects in 2026 and beyond webinar. As these regulations tighten, we've brought together SOCOMEC's legal experts and Eide Bailey to break what the guidance means and how to prepare. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A and we'll address them at the end. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Socomec North America's General Counsel, David Smith.
Thanks, Rachel, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. We're so glad you joined us. As Rachel mentioned, I am the General Counsel for North America for SOCOMEC, and I'm going to take just a few minutes to walk through an overview of the general information SOCOMEC and the great team from Eide Bailey will share with you today about the current guidance surrounding the energy storage tax credits. Ide Bailey is going to talk about the definitions of the foreign controlled entities, which are the target of the tax credit guidance. They'll also discuss, of course, the material assistance ratio calculation, which is at the heart of the guidance as well. They'll touch on previous guidance and the safe harbors that are available under previous guidance. They'll talk about the fact that the guidance that we have recently received is temporary in nature yet, still in the comments period, and we don't know when the IRS will make guidance final on these topics, but the information that's available we're going to cover today. They'll also talk about the penalties for taxpayers associated with non-compliance with the material calculation, and they're significant. Finally, we couldn't have a discussion today without talking about tariffs to some degree, and we'll touch on that topic as well. Lastly, I want to emphasize that the information we're sharing today is general. Your particular business strategy and your particular investment tax credit activities will vary, and we strongly encourage you to seek your own legal and tax advice that's customized to your plans. Having said all of that, let me turn it over to Joe O'Neill with Eide Bailey, and we hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Dave. My name is Joe O'Neill. I'm a partner. I lead our energy incentives practice and our energy practice here at Eide Bailey. Eide Bailey is an accounting firm, about $800 million in revenue, 3,000 employees, kind of a nationwide firm. Our practice really focuses in on assisting clients in ITC, PTC space. And part of that, frankly, is really understanding the new FEOC regs. With me along, I've got Austin Eden, who's a manager in my group. We've been working together for the last 12 or so years, and then Chad Martin has decided to join us as well. Chad is the principal in charge of our transfer pricing practice and has a lot of the information relating to the tariffs. So really good, kind of jam-packed session that we have today. So I want to go ahead and pass on to the next slide. Let's give you a quick overview of kind of how we got here. It was back in May of last year. And one of the things that we like to do as a practice is we like to be in the market. We like to go to big trade shows. And one of the ones we were at was, it's called Clean Power. It's a pretty large solar, wind, BESS trade show. And we have a booth, and we're there to really understand what's going on in the market. And we have a booth, though, for people that have questions about ITCs, PTCs, et cetera. And so oftentimes you'll have situations where entities come up to you and say, hey, what do you do? What's Eide Bailey? And we say, we're an accounting firm. And they kind of look at you and you say, well, okay, well, can I have a minute? Let's go on to the next thing. And understood. The FEOC rules and the House bill came out the night of the last night of the conference. And the next morning, Trevor Noah was speaking, and he specifically mentioned you should go find an accountant to go through these new rules. And we were very popular that next Thursday. So one of the things that we were kind of digesting that evening was a lot of the FEOC restrictions, which is frankly not a new thing necessarily, but it was a little bit of a unique. It was a bit of a 90-degree turn, let's say, from what we expected from the House bill. Effectively, what kind of got eventually watered down slightly in the Senate version of the OB3 or the OBBA is it really created these new restrictions on ITCs and PTCs, investment tax credits and production tax credits. I should reference. Generally speaking, businesses that are based in specific countries, and effectively it's China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. That's not a holistic list. That list can change and contract. But effectively, if you are an entity that is owned in one of those countries, you are not going to be able to claim investment tax credits or production tax credits. And a lot of the incentives that exist in the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, are substantially peeled back if you are a FEOC. Now, this created a pretty seismic shift within the investment tax credit space and the production tax credit space. And so there's a lot of the actual code came out, and then they said Treasury is going to issue safe harbors by the end of 2026. They have issued some prospective guidance, but it is not final yet. We are in the commentary period, so we are in a place where we have a lot of uncertainty around FEOC. And with that, we'll kind of dive into exactly what is a foreign entity of concern. We can go to the next slide. To start off, really, you've got kind of specified foreign entities. A specified foreign entity is an entity that is owned by either a foreign person or government from a covered nation. So those covered nations is what we discussed earlier. It's China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea. Realistically, in this space, right, it's almost always going to be coming from China. That's what we see 98% of the time in actual practice. Now, just because you are not a SFE or a specified foreign entity does not mean that you're not triggered potentially by these FEOC rules. It's possible to be either a foreign influenced entity, which is basically through ownership, debt, or contractual. And basically, if you're taking funding from an SFE through as a foreign influence entity, or you're getting material assistance from an SFE in the prior 12 months, then you are deemed a foreign entity of concern, and you are not able to ultimately claim an ITC on your projects or a PTC to the extent that you have production tax credits that you're generating. Now, we quickly went over what an SFE is. Like we said, it's a government. It's an entity that is owned more than 50% by a covered nation. Any sort of entity that's controlled, that by a non-U.S. citizen, that's a person who is a citizen or a national of a covered nation, then you will ultimately end up under the SFE rules. Generally speaking, one big, large exception to this is for publicly traded entities. To the extent that an entity is publicly traded, generally speaking, that entity is not going to be treated as foreign controlled. To the extent that let's talk quickly about what it means to be a foreign influenced entity. Basically, if you've got direct authority from a SFE, meaning that your SFE, the specified foreign entity, is owned and they have the ability to appoint a covered officer to your entity, then you are going to be a foreign influenced entity. To take a kind of tiny step back here, let's say you're a domestic U.S. corp. Your parent corp is 25% Chinese, but they have the ability to appoint a covered officer, then you will be considered a foreign influenced entity and you will be unable to claim any sort of ITCs or PTCs. Additionally, to the extent that if you've got a foreign entity that owns at least 25% of your entity, or and I say or, not and, or one or more of the specified entities collectively owns at least 40%. So you've got 25% in one or 40% in total, then you will likely be considered a foreign influenced entity. Now, foreign influenced entity, once you go up and down the supply chain, that taints the supply chain. So if you've got you're a battery manufacturer, and you are considered a foreign influenced entity, then your portion of the overall unit of property, energy property, will be considered from a FEOC. Kind of moving on, one thing that's often missed is debt. So to the extent that your debt is issued from specified foreign entities, then generally speaking, once again, you will be considered a foreign influenced entity. So there's a lot of trip ups and places where you can be caught in these FEOC rules. The one that the ownership tests are the ones that most people think of. Debt is often missed. Once again, though, remembering there is an exception for publicly traded entities. Final one we'll talk about really quickly is the contractual entities. Effectively, to the extent that the entity during the previous year has made payments to a specified foreign entity under a specific contract or arrangement, that will give the specified foreign entity effectively control over all of the qualified facility or energy storage technology. So the three things that most of the entities will need to worry about on here is, are you a foreign influence entity through ownership, debt, or contracts? And what is your relationship, if any, within your supply chain to any specified foreign entities? Once again, just because you're working with an entity that you know is out of China, Iran, Russia, or North Korea, although I've not seen a North Korea yet, just because you should check to see whether they are public in nature, and then talk to your accountants to determine, or legal counsel to determine that impact on your overall operations. For that, let's talk about the MACR. The MACR is, generally speaking, impactful for four primary credits. It's 45Q, 45Y, 45Z, and 48E. The vast majority of what we're seeing is in the 48E space, or the ITC. Remember, 48 was the historical investment tax credit. Then the beginning of 25, we moved over to 48E, which is the clean electricity investment tax credit, which theoretically, right, is technology neutral. But BESS, battery systems, generally energy storage technology, that is going to fall under 48E. One thing that's really kind of unique in this space with the material assistant cost ratio, the rules are really tough to get through, especially if you are not used to reading tax code that was kind of put together pretty late at night by 23, 24-year-olds. Effectively for BESS, the ones that we're ultimately going to focus on here the most, the MACR from a PFE must not exceed 45%. In other words, 55% of your supply chain must be non-PFE sourced. That's the easiest way to think of it. When you actually read the code, it's like double negative, single negative, double negative. But that's kind of it in a nutshell when you're trying to determine the MACR. With that, I think Austin is going to spend a few minutes kind of walking through the actual calculation and the safe harbor itself.
Yep, thanks, Joe. So first, qualified facilities and energy storage technologies. The MACR compares total direct costs of manufactured products incorporated into the project against the portion of those costs attributable to products manufactured by a prohibited foreign entity. So this requires the taxpayers to identify all the manufactured products and manufactured product components included in the facility, determine those direct costs, which I should note includes direct material and labor, of course, as well as any acquisition costs for purchasing the item, and then isolate those costs attributable to PFE produced items. So at a high level, the material assistance cost ratio equals total direct cost minus PFE direct cost divided by total direct cost of the qualified facility. Also noting a separate calculation is required for each qualified facility or energy storage technology that is placed in service. So why does this binary eligibility test, not a bonus calculated equals no credit, regardless of everything else, which could include domestic content? It'd be a rare scenario, but for example, the current domestic content percentage in 2026 is 50%. There could be a situation in which a battery energy storage, it's 54% US made and still fail and not receive a credit if the remaining 46% comes from a prohibited foreign entity.
That's a good point, Austin. Just so everybody's aware, remember that domestic content does not equal material assistance. Those are two separate calculations, separate but similar, but it's very possible to be past the domestic content, but not past the MACR.
We can go to the next slide, please. So to help taxpayers comply, the IRS has provided interim guidance under Notice 2026-15, which include two main safe harbors. At a high level, the identification safe harbor allows taxpayers to use official tables introduced in previous domestic content notices to identify which products and components must be considered. As you can see in the table below, this is an example for battery energy storage technology. The cost percentage safe harbors let taxpayers use assigned cost percentages from those tables rather than tracking actual costs for every item. There's also the certification safe harbor, where suppliers can certify that their products are not from prohibited foreign entities, provided that the buyer/taxpayer has no reason to doubt the certification. However, this requires direct cost information as opposed to the provided percentages in the table below. While this is helpful in reducing the administrative burden, there's still a number of practical challenges related to data availability. In terms of data availability when using the safe harbor tables, suppliers may not disclose or even have visibility into subcomponent sourcing. Likewise, a manufactured product is typically made of several subcomponents sourced from a variety of different countries. So, for example, in the case of a grid scale BESS, the battery cells have an assigned percentage of 52% in the safe harbor table. However, not all of the subcomponents of that cell might be sourced from a non-PFE. So as you can see, we're talking, you're looking at percentages of percentages for each manufactured product component, which could prove to be an equally convoluted and, heavy administrative burden. So of course, if choosing to forgo the identification approach, the taxpayer would be required to receive actual cost tracing from suppliers, which requires deeper supply chain visibility, which most vendors might not have or more likely not be willing to share with a customer. So in conclusion, the material assistance cost ratio turns supply chain diligence into a credit eligibility issue. So if you don't track it early on, you may not have a credit to claim at all, making it an incredibly important exercise to get in front of early.
So next slide. What does this kind of all boil down to? What does it mean? Well, it depends on when you look at the credit facility, first of all, what are you planning on to do? What do you plan on doing with it? Are you selling it? Are you utilizing it internally? Are you applying for a direct pay? Are you a governmental entity? Regardless of kind of which of those three you've got a lot of due diligence now on your hands in order to determine kind of who your suppliers are. What is their ownership? Are they public? Are they private? What does their debt look like? And are you in a place or a position as a buyer to even ask these questions? realistically, we've certainly, both Austin and I and Trina, have been in situations where, our client wants to get this information for domestic content historically, and the supplier is just unwilling or doesn't want to provide it. So these are situations where you're gonna have to really lean on your relationships with your suppliers, understanding that things like minority investments, random contracts can have impact. So it's really a deep dive that your suppliers need to go into this. This does create a 10-year ITC recapture period, which is 5 more, obviously, than the typical 5-year recapture period. The reason I mentioned what are they doing with it? Are you selling it? Are you utilizing it internally? Are you getting a direct pay? If you're selling it, this has a huge impact on the 6418 market. We are seeing substantial change in that market right now, specific to ITCs. Most ITCs at this point that are going to be 48E, so kind of post this year, the expectation is going to be insurance, no matter the size of the underlying ITC. Talking through to large insurance, the underwriting process associated with this is going to be painful. So it's going to be very important for your clients and for the folks that are ultimately claiming the ITC to have all this ready and available when it comes time to go through that process. Kind of next slide. And then finally, just kind of big picture considerations. Remember the phase outs. Remember when you've got to start construction. If you've got solar or wind associated with this, really you've got to get it moving by July 3rd of this upcoming year. Remember, beginning of construction rules are now virtually are no longer the same as they were. If you are over 1.5 meg, you've got totally new rules, or not totally new rules, but you've got you don't have a rule that you used to have with a 5% ownership payment safe harbor. Understanding PFEs, understanding, are you a PFE? Are you influenced? What is your MACR, your maker? Like that, those are all important things that you're going to need to determine. And then you need to document this internally, up and down. If you're a supplier, if you're a seller, you need to document this kind of for your clients, and really look to what your company looks like. What does your debt look like? Who are your owners? And then where available, go ahead and grab your supplier certifications and have those ready. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Chad, I believe. And Chad's going to walk through some of the tariffs, given the Supreme Court ruling recently. And we thought that was a kind of a good time to dive in. Chad?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Austin. And I'll reiterate David's point at the beginning of the call. Uh, this is not a tariff webinar, to everyone's relief here, but today pretty much everything goes back to something that can raise the cost of your product by up to 40%. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm Chad Martin. I lead the transfer pricing practice at Eide Bailly. For the past year, by necessity rather than by choice, I have taken on the moonlighting job of what I call tariff therapist, trying to keep up with every single week of changing rules, regulations, judicial action lately, and trying to help our clients here at Eide Bailly manage that process, optimize their footprint, make lemonade out of lemons, for lack of a better term. So I had a brief window here where it was exciting to be the tariff guy. On February 20th, the Supreme Court overturned IEEPA tariffs. Those are the reciprocal tariffs. Those are also the ones on fentanyl duties specific to China, Mexico, and a few other countries. Any tariffs that were essentially applied under the authority of the Emergency Economic Powers Act by President Trump were deemed illegal. And there was a big round of applause and celebration from importers in the US. Oh, there's going to be refunds coming. This is going to be great. There's going to be no tariffs. I want to set level with everyone here now. That is not the case. You all in this call have the advantage of being used to tariffs. This is not the first president that has put tariffs and customs duties on your industry. Those go back several years, most materially to the Biden administration in 2024. So this is not a new concept for you, but there has been a lot of changes. So walking you through the events that have happened since that infamous, famous, whatever it is, Supreme Court ruling on February 20th, overturning IEPA. February 24th gave us some clarity on what that means practically. Broadly speaking, the Court of International Trade comes in and says on March 4th, okay, it's not enough to say that the prior tariffs were illegal. We are also going to mandate Customs and Border Protection to initiate a refund process. They later clarified Customs and Border Protection, it's not enough for you to sit here and wait for protests on the illegal tariffs that importers have paid. You also need to design a system that is capable of calculating those refunds, applying a 6% interest rate compounded daily onto illegal tariffs that have been paid since the start of IEPA tariffs that were eventually ruled illegal. And you need to also have a system in place for executing and making those disbursements through ACH. So in response, the Trump administration on February 24th, just a few days after the IEPA tariffs were ruled illegal, said, okay, we've got other tricks, we've got other tools in our pocket here. Section 122 allows tariffs to be broadly applied to trading partners, a lot like the reciprocal tariffs that we were used to from Liberation Day, apply it on a country basis, not on a product basis. He announced tariffs of 10%. He then announced those would increase to the maximum allowed of 15%. He then said, okay, 10 sounds good after all. And so now where we stand with Section 122, essentially reciprocal tariffs, is a blanket 10% tariff on importers. The important thing there is that those are only valid without congressional approval for 150 days, which puts those the implied expiration date on Section 122 tariffs around mid-July. I do not expect that they will be approved by Congress. Red and blue states alike, congressional representatives are not a fan, as you might imagine, as you may have seen from your own customer base. The other thing to note about these tariffs is that they are very likely to be subject to a very similar legal challenge as the IEPA tariffs. There was kind of a funny case where the Trump lawyer, in arguing for IEPA cases, made the point that, well, we can't use Section 122, so we need IEPA. It's going to be a little hard, I think, for the administration to argue that those Section 122 tariffs, specifically meant for overall balance of trade, balance of payment crises, are appropriate in place of the IEPA tariffs. That speculation kind of keeping us grounded in facts. Here, the latest information from CBP, an alert actually came out today. I didn't have time to drop it in the slides, but they're reporting actually pretty surprising progress on paper. They're saying generally around 75% of their new system for processing and calculating refunds, which they call CAPE, is complete. They have a target timeline of 45 days after the CIT order, which would put the go live date in a very rosy scenario at the end of next month, more likely early May. There are some nuances in the kind of phasing approach of the CAPE process. There will be a difference initially between unliquid entries and final liquidated entries, but eventually the Court of International Trade has essentially mandated that all IEPA tariffs need to be under the purview of this new CAPE refund system. So maybe moving to a category of tariffs that resonate with the folks on this call, let's focus specifically on the Harmonized Tariff Schedule Code 8507.6, as we all know and love. This is obviously lithium-ion batteries, non-EV lithium-ion batteries, particularly those used for storage. So walking through the 38.4% current blended rate of tariffs on those lithium-ion batteries from China, you have your base HTUS product tariff that's been around for a long time, 3.4%. Section 301, I'm going to skip to the third bullet here. This has also been around for quite a while. It was recently increased from 7.5% on January 1st of this year. That raised up to 25%, matching the lithium-ion tariffs for electric vehicle batteries. So that gets you here to 28.4%. The other 10% comes from a stacking 10% tariff. Stacking means that it's additive onto that baseline 25 and 3.4%. that Section 122 reciprocal tariff makes that effective rate 38.4% for lithium ion batteries purchased from China. I also wanted to mention Section 232 tariffs. These are national security tariffs that have been around for a while, applied on a product by product or sector by sector basis. These don't affect batteries directly, but they do have a downstream or ripple effect from components. Section 232 essentially applies a 50% tariff on steel, aluminum, and copper. From most jurisdictions, there's a couple jurisdictions who have negotiated lower rates there, 25% automotive as well. So that's what most of us are facing right now. Again, this is extremely impactful, even with the refunds and all of the challenges those will entail. That's still a cost of inventory right now that is essentially a third higher than it was at this time, maybe a year and a half ago, and has completely changed the cost profile of lithium ion batteries. A couple more general observations on the tariff landscape that we've been seeing from iBailey clients. Given the introduction of 122 as a substitute tariff, and given the administration's increasing use of other types of tariffs, there's a lot of Section 301 investigations into other countries, other products. We actually haven't seen much of an effective tariff rate relief on a blended basis. That effective tariff rate on U.S. imports has been more or less the same since before the ruling and after. The other big thing happening here is a lot of confusion after the initial excitement of the announcement of refunds. We're now turning to the question of how in the world is this going to actually work in practice, right? So we know that there's going to be this CAPE system calculating and processing refunds. That's about as far as it goes. There's a cascading effect of accounting questions. Yes, these will be taxable in the year that they're received, but even from then, there's state and local interaction. There's transfer pricing questions. How do you allocate that refund between related parties when maybe it was not the importer of record who ultimately bore the economic cost of those tariffs through your transfer pricing policies, through DDP, shipping and freight, so on and so forth? There's going to be a ton of complexity in what to do with these refunds. The other thing that we're seeing right now is a lot of pressure downstream from purchasers saying, hey, we know, importer of record, that you're receiving these refunds. Be advised that we are going to be asking for a prorated share or a direct share of what you allocated to us. You've been saying on Facebook and LinkedIn that you're raising prices because of tariffs. We now need these to be passed back on to us. As a consumer, I would love if that actually went all the way downstream. Unfortunately, I don't think we as the consumer base can lawyer up to that extent. But I am seeing those letters and that pressure coming downstream on importers of records, essentially threatening legal action and other sorts of pressure to make sure that those tariff expense that were borne ultimately downstream are passed through. So there's a lot more behind that. I know we have quite a bit of webinar to get to. We're happy to answer questions here in the chat or after the webinar is over. But thanks all for allowing me a little bit of time to talk about a subject that is increasingly taking up my life and yours these days. And with that, I think we'll pass it on to the SOCOMEC team and Chuck.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chad. That's the tariff therapist, but I'm going to hang my hat on that one. So my name is Chuck Ramus. I'm the Director of Business Development for SOCOMEC for energy storage. And we're going to take about 15 minutes and walk through the company and the product that aligns with the rules and regulations you've just seen. So next slide, please. Okay, so everything is somewhere. This is where SOCOMEC is. This is our headquarters. And it's in northeastern France. You can, we're about a half hour south of the European Parliament buildings in Strasbourg. That's Germany across the Rhine in the background. So we are a privately held French company. There's no Chinese ownership. There's no Chinese loans. There's no Chinese board members. This is about as far from a foreign entity of concern as you could possibly have. Next slide. So Socomec does a lot of things. This deck is about energy storage. It's commercial and industrial. We're usually behind the meter. The product we're focusing on today is 480 volts AC, three-phase. The range is from hundreds of kilowatt hours up to multi-megawatt hours. Next. So again, this is we're not publicly traded. We are a privately held, frankly, a family-owned company. It's a really cool place to work. I've got a lot of colleagues that have been here 10, 15, 20, some cases 30 odd years. It's the kind of place that when people find this company and realize how fun it is to be here, they stay. It's a really cool place to work. And it just speaks to the stability of the entity you're dealing with. Next slide. So financially, here's a one slide snapshot. We're essentially old, Dun & Bradstreet 5A1, that's their top rating. 14 factories around the globe, 6 of those are in North America. 1 billion US in revenue, about 5,000 employees. Again, it's a financially conservative, stable company. Next. So this is what we do. I mean, obviously, we've not been doing energy storage for a century. So left to right, three-phase power switching is the industrial and financial foundation of the company. Stuff sold under our own name and also the names of other even larger companies in the field that you know. Digital power monitoring, dominant in our home country in France, growing rapidly here. This is revenue grade digital metering. Every input is less than 0.1%, super precise. Power conversion is something we've been doing since the 1960s. Uninterruptible power supplies are a core business for us. We're fanatical about not only the uninterruptible part, but also the quality of the waveform. And the same team that designs the power conversion cores for energy for UPSs designs the power conversion cores for energy storage. Far right, expert services, 400 globally, about 40 in the US, and growing rapidly. That will increase 50% again this year. So commissioning, service, support is all done with staff technicians. So if you take the 4 blue boxes and add batteries, the yellow box energy storage is, you can see that it's a core business for us, not just because of the proximity to the others, but because the leadership and the ownership have said this will be a primary focus. This is a way that Socomec accelerates the clean energy transition. Next slide. Okay, one more slide on the company and then we'll get to the product. When we poll our existing customers, and 90+% of our sales go to an established customer base that buys in quantity year after year. We sell through partners. When we ask our partners why they're repeat customers, I mean, we're happy, but why? We get remarkably consistent answers. The hardware works, and that's not a given in this business. But the quality of the service is without peer. And that breaks into 2 sections. Pre-sales, we don't just send a price and a proposal, a price and an email. We prepare a formal proposal. And to do that, we analyze your requirements. We study your single lines. We suggest corrections to your single lines. And when a proposal comes, it's for a specific project with a specific set of equipment, delivery to site. It's a very thorough offer. Post-sales, there's a team of dedicated engineers / project managers. All they do is shepherd the project from PO received to installed and operating. Next slide. This is the offer. This is the hardware set that aligns with the rules and regulations we've just learned more about. The name is a mouthful. It's SunSys Hybrid Energy Storage Large, skid-mounted with energy control cabinets. And we'll break that into 2 pieces. Those of you that have been following Socomec for some years know that SunSys HESL has been around since about 2020 with a converter cab made by Socomec and imported batteries. So that integration is established. They're installed in numbers in both Europe and in North America. Voice of customer has been consistent for the last couple of years. We like this and we plan to buy more, but could you please add on to this? And there have been two sets of requests. One, in the yellow, can you put the converter cabin battery cabinets on a steel subframe, on a skid, with all the wiring completed and tested at a factory? The second voice of customer has been, you manufacture a lot of things we need to buy separately. You make transformers for the auxiliary circuit. You make circuit breakers. You make DigiWare monitoring and controls. Could you please package all these things in an integrated cabinet so we can buy a integrated thingy from you and not have to assemble all these pieces in the field? So both of these options have been in development for a couple of years now. When we look at this in the light of the new tax laws, if all of them are considered together, the material assistance cost ratios are well above the thresholds, and every configuration of Sunsys HEL skid with energy control cabinets qualifies for the 30% ITC. Next slide. So the skid comes in three basic shapes. It's very simple. 1, 2, or 3 battery cabinets. Each battery cabinet is about 200 kilowatt hours. So 200, 400, or 600 kilowatt hours, depending on the size of the skid. The weights are on the slide in pounds, in tons, round numbers. It's 4 tons, 7 tons, or 10 tons, what the three would weigh. The advantages of this thing, of course, are that it's going to install much more quickly, but it can also be moved to a different site if needed. Time and motion studies have shown that the cost of the skid is more than offset by reducing the cost of installation. Next slide. So we don't have time today to drill into all the components that are in the energy control cabinets. These slides will be shared after. We'd be happy to book separate web meetings with interested customers to go through the offer in more detail. But the basic idea, again, is in the blue box on the left, these are the hardware bits included. The advantage is in yellow, all the systems are backup power ready. The majority of our systems are installed on grid with a backup power capability. These are grid forming converters. These are backup power enabled systems. Monitoring is included. Procurement is very simple. It's just one big item to buy, reduced engineering costs, and the whole thing is certified and scalable. Next slide, please. Okay, we haven't much time. So if we were doing this for an individual customer, we would take more time and go through the details of the various components. Today, we'll just say that the converter cabinet is made by Socomec. This is actually imported from our factory in Italy. It's a modular system, and depending how many 50 kilowatt modules are populated in this chassis, just think of it as a rack-mounted briefcase. They slide into place. There's no jumper cables, there's no lugs, there's no torquing. Simply sliding them in makes all electrical and data connections. Very high quality piece of European design. Probably the most counterintuitive thing is no external transformer is required. Yes, Vishwas. Next slide. This is the battery, the NR1. We've been using this since 2020. Perfect safety record, strong degradation performance, just a quality battery all the way around. Next. Certifications and listings. Again, there's an alphabet soup of certifications, listings, and requirements for energy storage. For this presentation, suffice to say that we have a team of people working not only to comply, but to anticipate future regulations. So this system is certified to be installed all over the United States. Happy to dive into these details on a call with customers. Next. Configurations at a high level. Is this screen kind of hung between two slides for everyone else? Let's go forward one more. Next. There we are. Roadmap for future products into end of 2027. We've been focused today primarily on the top line, Sunsys Hybrid Energy Storage Large with the import battery It's orderable at present with first deliveries in Q3 that will continue to be orderable into the new year with deliveries throughout 2027 and beyond. We are also introducing an American-made battery for the same product line that should be orderable late summer, first delivery spring 2027. And we're also adding two larger siblings, and XL, which is 800 kilowatt hours to about 2.5 megawatt hours, and a container battery, the new double XL, 3, 4, or 5 megawatt hours. All of these highlighted in blue on the table, American-made cells, modules, and enclosures. They will be MACR well above 55% and domestic content above 55%, so qualifying for 40% ITC. Next screen. Last slide, which is about service. These are complicated assets, and they will be in service for a decade or two. So the quality of service and support is very important. Socomec staff technicians will be on site for commissioning in every case. That's included in every quote. We always have our people on site, and sometimes days if needed, make sure everything is installed correctly, verify communications with the energy management software partner. Warranties are a 5-year standard warranty, and that includes all annual maintenance. Almost all customers choose 10 or a 15-year warranty. 20 is also available. All warranty packages include all annual maintenance provided by Socomec technicians. I think that kind of wraps up this presentation. I think we can now, we'll touch on this one. To prepare that detailed proposal, we will work with you to complete an intake form. Reach out to us after this presentation, and we'll be happy to walk through an intake process with you to get started on developing that detailed proposal. I think with that, we're now ready for questions on the entire presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chuck. Thank you, everyone who presented. We have a few questions to go through for the short amount of time we have remaining, so I will be speeding through them. The first question we have is, from a project execution perspective, how are developers practically balancing FEOC compliance requirements with system reliability, especially when supply chain constraints limit access to proven BESS components?
I think that's a good question. Right now, what we're really truly seeing is a push from foreign manufactured batteries and components of the batteries to domestic. If there's one thing this is doing really successfully, it's onshoring quite a bit of the battery and solar and wind, kind of all of the different components are coming onshore. I think right now what you're seeing is a heavy push towards sourcing out of Europe. So I think the supply chain is moving away from Chinese sourced goods. There's also a fair amount of the components that are coming out of China are still out there. And so what might happen is the components might be going in a smaller portion to an entity that will ultimately utilize that doesn't have a relationship with them, that'll go into the MACR, but it's going to end up being under 55%. So that's kind of what we're ultimately seeing, is that the supply chain constraints are certainly moving where this is actually occurring. Anything else, Austin or Trina or David?
No, I think you covered it.
We also had another question, Rachel. I think it was by the same person. Do you expect FEOC and ITC related constraints to drive a shift towards more localized or vertically integrated BESS supply chains, and how might that impact project bankability? We are seeing that real time. I think Chuck just showed that, frankly. We've got multiple clients that are out of Europe. that have historically utilized components from China. They are definitively moving away from that as a whole. Domestic content is another thing that is very important here. Domestic content, to the extent that you are a not-for-profit or a governmental entity that wants to claim the ITC, you got to remember domestic content on a going forward basis is something that you must meet now. There is an exception for costing, but that's not an easy exception to meet. So domestic content along with FEOC are absolutely more moving towards a more onshored, vertically integrated supply chain. How that impacts project bankability, costs go up, credit goes up. That's funding, capital, cap stack, cap raise becomes harder. I think that's generally what we're going to see. Any, let's see, there was another couple that I wanted to make sure I hit on.
Yeah, not to jump the gun, but I did want to
Go for it.
note that the guidance issued, the notice, further guidance could potentially change this, but these are not draft. These are
Right. The notice that has come out, they're not regs. It's not a proposed reg. It's not temp regs. It's a notice. It is law. We are still in the commentary period, but it does like all these rules do apply. I had a question on the July 3rd date. That's the date that you've got to start your solar and wind projects in order for them to be credit eligible. Let's see here.
You can still be credit eligible post July 4th. You just have until December 31st, 2027 to place that in service. So your runway is much shorter.
I guess, can you walk us through the most common challenges companies face when preparing the documentation needed for FEOC compliance review? It really comes down to how detailed and how complex your supply chain is. If you've got a fairly vertically integrated entity and your product is pretty much primarily produced internally, then it really comes down to where is that being manufactured and what is your ownership, who's your debt through. That almost never happens. In the ones that we've worked through, I'd say at this point, virtually every large public accounting firm and every large to medium-sized law firm is going to have some sort of offering where they perform FEOC compliance, really review your supply chain. Most of the time when we perform this work and these studies, it is a little bit of a it's difficult to ultimately get everything you need around the ownership. And frankly, that's often missed when it's done internally. But the supply chain can be very, very difficult. What we've seen as a big challenge is people up and down the supply chain that may or may not, maybe one of their core things that they're providing you is not only going into ITC eligible property, and they just don't have FEOC and this stuff on their radar screen at all. So like cabinet makers, for example, they might be making cabinets for all sorts of other stuff, not just batteries. And so when we ask the cabinet maker, where's your stuff coming from? The first impact is, whoa, we don't want to give you that information. You're asking for our direct costs. We don't have any interest in giving you that direct cost. Frankly, we need that in order to operate. And so usually what we'll see is some sort of NDA get put in place. And there's a third party that will kind of review everything, gather documentation, and then ultimately perform the calculation. Anything else you've seen, Austin?
No, that's right in line with what.
How long does a typical FEOC compliance review project take, kind of from initial gathering to final letter? It's pretty broad. It's all over the place. Anywhere, I would say, from if you really needed to get it done quickly, probably 3 weeks to 6 weeks, to realistically 8 to 12 for kind of a relatively normally run, normally complex study. It really comes down to how difficult the supply chain is. Are there language constraints? How good is your relationship with your suppliers? I can say, I mean, I'll just answer the question from our perspective with Socomec. They were really very clean from an ownership perspective. And full disclosure, we did perform the work for Socomec. They were very, very clean from an overall ownership perspective. Very little debt. Ownership is very cleanly a French family. And so it was the supply chain, and the supply chain, frankly, was fairly straightforward as well. There was a couple areas where we had to dig in. I actually don't think we needed to get an NDA for Socomec, so that was good to see. I don't know if you recall that, Austin. But big picture, Socomec was, we went through and quantified and qualified the vast majority of their stuff. There's, I think that's now kind of all Socomec's property, and they can share that to the extent that their customers want to see that. Anything else before I've got one or two other ones I think that might be good. If anybody else is I'm actually to see some open questions that came up. Let's see here.
While you're looking,
There's a couple. Chuck, do you see those questions? Like there's one.
I'm just trying to toggle to that screen right
Well, I can just ask you one. It was like, do you know right now, Chuck, if the domestic content product uses US cells?
The domestic content product planned for 2027 delivery,
Yep.
American-made cells. Yes.
Okay. And then assume for that one as well. Do you know any? And I think we're good on domestic content. I'm assuming we're going to be okay from a BABA perspective going forward, but I don't know if we've done any work around the BABA compliance.
Yeah. So it's Buy American, Build American, BABA is definitely planned. We're getting a lot of questions about that with the domestic cells. So that's definitely something that we intend to do, and I'm sure we'll be engaging our friends at Eide Bailly to make sure we're doing that one correctly as well.
Yeah, and then one thing I'd say for those that are trying to get domestic content, especially if you're a developer here, don't be afraid to ask for a third party to come in and get an NDA. That seems to grease the skids 9 times out of 10. And we've been really successful with that. We've done it probably 20 plus times in the last 6 months, and we've been able to get all the information that we ultimately need.
Okay, perfect, guys. We are actually out of time. Any questions we did not answer, we will be shooting you an email with those answers as well. Or if you got a private message as well to take it offline, we will send that message out to you as well. But thanks again for joining our webinar today. A recording will be sent out after this as well. And yep, we appreciate you all for joining.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Thanks for your time.
thank you.
Bye.